My sister invited me to her baby shower to announce that my late husband was her child's father and demanded half of my inheritance. So, I revealed documents that left her speechless. Now our parents are in complete shock. Can you possibly conceive of a world where your very foundation crumbles? Not once, but twice over? I was a grieving widow, merely existing, desperately trying to reassemble the fragments of a life irrevocably shattered by the loss of my soulmate. But then, an earth-shattering secret detonated, exposing a betrayal so profound, so utterly unimaginable. It didn't just challenge. It annihilated everything I believed about love, loyalty, family, and even the very fabric of my existence. Tell me, what would you do if your meticulously constructed reality imploded, not in private, but for the entire world to witness? Barely 6 months prior, the life I knew, the life we built, simply ceased to exist. One moment, I was Karen, 32, blissfully married, meticulously sketching out our future with James. The next, I was a widow, adrift in a tsunami of grief, sifting through the grim practicality of cremation because his body was too tragically damaged for an open casket. Those initial weeks were a fractured kaleidoscope of funeral arrangements, an incessant ringing of the phone, and a relentless parade of sleepless nights. Honestly, had my parents not intervened, navigating the labyrinth of arrangements, I doubt I would have emerged from that suffocating darkness. Karen, honey, we've handled everything, Mom had murmured, her voice a balm, softer than I'd ever known it. You just focus on healing. My anchor became a support group, a circle of shared sorrow. Every Tuesday, I'd sit amid strangers, the hollow ache in my chest a relentless, physical presence. Some days are just impossible, I'd once whispered, my voice barely audible. Sometimes I wake up, and for a fleeting second, I forget he's gone. Maria, a woman who understood, her husband gone 2 years, reached across the circle, her hand a warm comfort on mine. That's normal, sweetie. Grief, it moves in relentless waves. Slowly, agonizingly, the months crawled onward. I began to confront the practicalities. James, ever thoughtful, had left me financially secure. Our home, a downtown apartment, a robust bank account. I could have easily relinquished my marketing career, but the very thought of languishing alone in our echoing house made my skin prickle with dread. So, I transitioned to part-time, a vital lifeline to prevent my mind from spiraling into the abyss. Then came the most bewildering alteration, my parents. All my life, I'd felt like a forgotten shadow cast by my younger sister, Sarah. Her dance recitals, her school plays, never missed. My academic triumphs? Barely a perfunctory nod. But after James's death, an inexplicable shift occurred. When they tentatively inquired if I could offer some financial assistance, a monthly transfer of $1,500, I consented without a moment's thought. Suddenly, our weekly dinners transformed into a cherished ritual. Mom would prepare her legendary pot roast. Dad would ceremoniously uncork the wine, and we'd converse about everything, about nothing. For the first time, I genuinely felt the warmth of their undivided attention. Karen, enlighten us about that new project. Dad would genuinely inquire, his eyes alight with interest. The marketing campaign is thriving. I'd respond, relishing these precious moments of authentic connection. My boss believes it could secure a significant number of new clients. But that delicate equilibrium shattered the evening Sarah arrived for dinner. My younger sister, 7 months pregnant, swept into the room, instantly seizing all gravitational pull, as she always had. She lived across town, and we hadn't exchanged more than fleeting glances since James's funeral. "Sarah, darling, right here," Mom gushed, practically nudging me aside to accommodate her perpetual favorite. "Do you require another pillow? Are your feet swollen?" In that instant, I reverted to invisible. It was an audible click, a switch flipping. Their entire focus, a laser beam of adoration, locked on Sarah and her burgeoning pregnancy. The familiar, hollow ache of being eclipsed, of being unseen, resettled itself deep within my chest. An unwelcome, ancient companion I had foolishly believed I'd finally outgrown. So, is the father? I probed, attempting to carve a niche in their exclusive dialogue. Has he been informed about the baby? Sarah's face, usually so animated, darkened ominously. That, Karen, is my concern, she retorted, aggressively pushing morsels of food around her plate. I'm under no obligation to disclose the intricacies of my personal life. Mom, ever her staunch defender, instantly intervened. Karen, don't be intrusive. Your sister owes no one an explanation. The stark contrast was jarring. When I had endured fertility treatments, they felt entirely at liberty to demand exhaustive updates and inundate me with unsolicited advice. Yet now a wall of secrecy. But how do you intend to manage financially on your own? I persisted at a subsequent dinner, observing her pile generous portions onto her plate. Infants, Sarah, are a considerable expense. She waved a dismissive hand, that familiar, knowing smirk playing on her lips. Don't trouble yourself about my baby. We won't be soliciting assistance from anyone. I have every detail meticulously arranged. I should have paid more heed to that enigmatic smile, but I'd witnessed it countless times before. Sarah perpetually conjured fantastical get-rich-quick ventures that inevitably imploded. The organic smoothie enterprise that fizzled after 2 weeks, the life coaching certification she never completed, the cryptocurrency investment that devoured 3 months' rent. Trust me, she asserted, patting her burgeoning belly with an unshakable air of confidence that, in hindsight, should have screamed a cacophony of alarms. This time, everything is destined to unfold precisely as envisioned. Dad, meanwhile, beamed at her, as if she'd just unveiled a universal panacea. That's my girl, he extolled, always landing on her feet. I forced down another mouthful of pot roast, trying to suppress the bitter taste of perpetual second best. Some dynamics, I conceded, are simply immutable, watching my parents hang on Sarah's every carefully chosen word. The summons from Sarah arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was engrossed in reviewing quarterly reports when her name illuminated my phone screen. My initial impulse was to dispatch it to voicemail. Our exchanges were typically terse and strained. Yet, a faint glimmer, perhaps a familial hope, compelled me to answer. Karen. Her voice oozed with that saccharine sweetness she reserved exclusively for solicitations. I'm hosting my baby shower next weekend at Mom and Dad's. I would absolutely adore for you to be there. The invitation blindsided me. Our last substantive interaction dated back to James's funeral, where even then she'd appeared detached, almost discomfited. Are you certain? I managed, unable to completely mask my astonishment. I could count on a single hand the instances Sarah had genuinely sought my company. Of course, she chirped, the cheer unnervingly artificial. You're my only sister. It simply wouldn't be complete without you. Besides, I have a little surprise planned. A disquieting cadence in her voice made my stomach knot, but I consciously suppressed the unease. I'll be there, I promised, already mentally curating potential gifts. Perhaps, I mused, this was her nascent effort to mend the chasm between us. The subsequent Saturday, I arrived at my parents' home, cradling 2 meticulously wrapped packages, a sophisticated baby monitor and a handmade blanket, lovingly crafted. Despite our enduring discord, this was, after all, my future niece or nephew. The house itself had been transformed into a saccharine explosion of pastels. Pink and blue balloons bobbed in every corner. Streamers cascaded from every available surface, and a monumental diaper cake commanded the dining table. Only Sarah, I mused, could elevate a baby shower to a spectacle. She'd seemingly invited half the town. Aunt Margaret, Mom's bridge club cronies, Sarah's former college roommates. All a cacophony of giggles swirling around the punch bowl. Time for games, Sarah declared, wading through the throng in a flowing maternity gown that undoubtedly eclipsed my monthly rent. She radiated a certain glow, yes, but beneath it, a predatory glint in her smile sent a shiver of apprehension down my spine. Her eyes, unnervingly often, sought mine across the room, holding my gaze a beat too long. We dutifully endured the obligatory rituals, guessing her belly circumference, predicting the birth date, and the frankly revolting melted chocolate bar in a diaper game. I even, to my mild amusement and Sarah's visible pique, won the belly measuring contest. Throughout it all, she continued to cast these peculiar, almost expectant glances my way, as if anticipating a cue. Once the flurry of gift opening subsided, Sarah cooing over every onesie and gadget with utterly theatrical delight, she finally reached my offering. She held aloft the blanket, her fingers tracing the delicate, intricate pattern. Then, with a calculated glint in her eye, she clinked her glass, demanding the room's undivided attention. A hush descended. My heart, inexplicably, began to hammer against my ribs. The air itself seemed to thicken, growing impossibly heavy, suffocating. I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to everyone for joining us today, she began, one hand resting possessively on her prominent belly. But there's something else I feel compelled to share. I believe it's time everyone knows who the father of my baby truly is. My pulse rocketed. Sarah's eyes, cold and triumphant, locked onto mine across the stunned assembly, and in that horrifying, crystal-clear instant, I knew. The words hadn't even formed on her lips, yet I understood. But that pre-knowledge did nothing to blunt the excruciating impact. "The father," she announced, her voice resonating through the suddenly tomb-silent room, "is James Wilson, Karen's late husband." The world didn't just tilt. It heaved violently, spinning off its axis. Through the deafening roar in my ears, I registered shocked gasps, hushed whispers. Aunt Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Sarah's college friends huddled, a flurry of frantic murmurs. But the most brutal blow came from the utter lack of surprise on my parents' faces. They had been complicit. They had known. Before my mind could even begin to grapple with the seismic shift, Sarah spoke again, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction as she pivoted to face me directly. "And as James's baby is his sole heir, I am unequivocally entitled to half of everything he bequeathed to you, Karen. The house, the apartment, the money. My child deserves their father's inheritance." The room continued its dizzying spin. I instinctively clutched the back of a nearby chair, anchoring myself against the vertigo. Then my mother and father stepped forward, positioning themselves to flank Sarah like loyal, unyielding bodyguards. "Karen," Dad intoned, his stern business voice chilling me to the very marrow of my bones. "You must do the honorable thing here. Your nephew deserves his father's legacy." I found my voice, though it emerged as a ragged, disbelieving rasp. "You're lying. All of you are lying. James would never." "Oh, but he would." Sarah's smile twisted into something truly cruel as she retrieved her phone. "Then how do you explain these?" She brandished the screen, and my world utterly disintegrated for the second time. There they were, James and Sarah, entangled in each other's arms, their lips locked in a fervent kiss, clearly within the confines of a hotel room. Another photograph depicted them holding hands at a restaurant I'd never once recognized. "He loved me," Sarah proclaimed, her voice ringing with feigned heartbreak across the silent space. "He was planning to leave you for me. We were going to tell everyone." Her voice broke, convenient tears now coursing down her face. But then the accident happened, and all our plans. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My body, a mere automaton, moved on its own accord, snatching my purse, shoving past the stunned, whispering guests, stumbling blindly out to my car. I distantly heard Mom's frantic calls, but I was already reversing, tearing out of the driveway. The journey home was a void, a sickening blur. My mind, a relentless projector, replayed those damning photographs, the anonymous restaurant, the sterile hotel room. They had to be from those business trips he'd so glibly claimed. My phone erupted the moment I stepped through my front door, a relentless barrage of notifications. "Sarah," dozens of messages, each one a fresh, jagged shard of glass in my heart. Screenshots of conversations between her and James. "I don't love her anymore. I haven't for a long time. We'll tell everyone after the divorce. You're the only one I want to be with. I can't wait to start our life together." The timestamps, cruel and precise, stretched back months. My husband, my sister, plotting their clandestine future, while I endured invasive fertility treatments, foolishly believing I was the impediment in our marriage. That night, I became a phantom in my own home, pacing endlessly, touching James's familiar possessions, each touch a question. Had every moment, every memory, every promise of our life together been an elaborate, cruel deception? The first call from my parents pierced the dawn at precisely 7 a.m. I let it ring 4 torturous times before answering. "Karen, you need to be reasonable about this," Dad began, his voice devoid of customary greeting, already dripping with paternal authority. "The sooner you agree to split the inheritance, the easier this will be for everyone." The casual, breathtaking arrogance in his tone ignited a furious inferno within me. "Easier for whom?" I seethed silently. "For Sarah? For you? For all of us, dear." Mom chimed in, her voice tinny through the speakerphone. "You don't want this to get messy. When did you know about them?" The words emerged, a fragile, desperate whisper. A suffocating pause followed, the kind of pregnant silence that speaks volumes before a single sound is uttered. "We've known for a while," Mom finally conceded, her voice barely audible. "James confided in us about 6 months before, well before the accident." The timeline slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. 6 months. They had harbored this monstrous secret for 6 months, allowing me to weep inconsolably on their shoulders at his funeral, accepting my financial aid each month, all while silently condoning James and Sarah's grotesque betrayal. "Traitors," I articulated, the word falling cold and definitive from my tongue. "All of you." I severed the call, then immediately blocked their numbers. My hands trembled violently as I accessed my banking app, yet my resolve remained unshaken. I rescinded the monthly transfer to their account. Let them seek recompense from their precious Sarah now. 2 weeks dissolved into a haze of ignored calls and unread text messages. Then came Sarah's email, a stark, legalistic threat. She would sue if I didn't voluntarily relinquish half of everything. The word voluntarily felt like a grotesque obscenity. I simply couldn't formulate a reply. I couldn't bear to dwell on James's profound perfidy, couldn't fathom how many others must have known, must have seen them together, while I remained tragically oblivious. The hushed whispers at work became an excruciating torment. Pitying glances from some colleagues, barely concealed smirks from others. Tom, my boss, and one of the few genuine allies I had left, summoned me to his office after I'd catastrophically broken down in the midst of a client presentation. "Take some time off," he offered gently. "Paid or unpaid, whatever supports you best. Your position will be secure when you're ready to return." I nodded, overwhelmed by his unexpected grace, and began clearing my desk that very day. The ensuing weeks blurred into a hermetic existence within my own home. Groceries were delivered, the doorbell remained unanswered, and I spent countless hours scrutinizing old photographs, a desperate archaeologist searching for the telltale signs I must have so spectacularly missed. Every cherished memory now felt like a cruel, mocking charade. Every intimate moment of our marriage, irrevocably tainted by the crushing revelation of his double life with my own sister. The news of fresh stab arrived via Facebook. Sarah had birthed a son. The accompanying photograph depicted her radiant in a hospital bed, our parents beaming proudly over their new grandson. The infant was swaddled in the very cream-colored blanket I had meticulously knitted for the shower, a detail that felt like a deliberate, cruel jab. I slammed the app shut before the comments could inflict further wounds, but not before registering his name. James Jr. A week later, a thick, foreboding manila envelope appeared in my mailbox. My hands quaked as I tore it open, my gut instinct already whispering its grim contents. Sarah was suing me, demanding half of James's estate, asserting her son's right to his father's inheritance. The legal lexicon was chillingly precise, outlining her demands in stark, unforgiving black and white. The house, half the monetary assets, partial ownership of the downtown apartment. After 3 grueling days researching lawyers, I settled on Richard Martinez, a formidable attorney renowned for intricate inheritance disputes. "Miss Wilson," he stated, his neutral expression unwavering as he sifted documents. "I must be candid. Your sister presents compelling evidence of a sustained, intimate relationship with your late husband. Texts, photos, even witness statements from your own parents." He adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles, his gaze piercing. "In these cases, an intimate connection combined with a biological child, the courts tend to be sympathetic." I was still reeling from this fresh wave of devastating news when my phone chimed that evening. An unknown number. "Hello, is this Karen Wilson?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar yet unsettlingly resonant, spoke. Something in its cadence, its subtle timbre, made my heart lurch. "I'm Elizabeth Parker, James's mother." The world abruptly lurched sideways. I instinctively gripped the cold kitchen counter, bracing for impact. "That's impossible." I rasped, the breath caught in my throat. "James was an orphan. He told me his parents perished when he was young, that he grew up in foster care." Another meticulously constructed lie, shattering. "I'm afraid so." Her voice held a potent cocktail of bitterness and sorrow, yet it wasn't unkind. "Would you be willing to meet? There are things you need to know, things that might aid you." We agreed to converge at a quaint downtown cafe the following morning, neutral territory. I arrived punctually, my stomach a nest of writhing knots. Ordering a coffee I knew I couldn't possibly consume. The cup nearly slipped from my trembling fingers the moment she stepped inside. The resemblance was utterly unnerving. James possessed her eyes, her smile, even the understated elegance of her bearing. She moved with that same fluid grace I had so long admired in him. "I was at the funeral," she stated softly, once we had retreated to a secluded corner booth, safely beyond the reach of curious ears. "Back row, black dress and veil." I simply couldn't bring myself to approach you then. James and I hadn't spoken in years. I remembered her then, vividly, the solitary figure, a wraith in black, who had quietly slipped away before the service concluded. Lost in my own abyssal grief, I hadn't spared a thought as to her identity. But now, that fragmented memory coalesced with searing clarity. The elegant woman, standing apart, her face shrouded by a dark veil. "Why are you coming forward now?" I queried, striving to purge any hint of suspicion from my voice. After the recent deluge of devastating revelations concerning James, trusting anyone remotely connected to him felt like an act of profound folly. Elizabeth delved into her handbag, extracting a well-worn manila envelope, its edges softened by time and countless anxious touches. "Because I've heard what your sister is claiming," she explained, her voice tinged with a quiet fortitude. "And because, despite everything, I cannot stand by and allow another woman to suffer for my son's deceit." Her fingers trembled almost imperceptibly as she slid the envelope across the polished table. With hands that mirrored her tremor, I opened it. Inside were official medical record from Boston General Hospital, dated a decade prior, approximately a year before James and I exchanged vows. My eyes raced across the document, and I felt the last vestiges of color drain from my face. Complete azoospermia, permanently sterile. No possibility of natural conception. The cold, clinical terms leapt from the page, each a fresh, brutal blow. "James had these tests done when he was 25, Elizabeth elaborated, her voice a gentle murmur. "He was utterly devastated by the results. It was one of the last, deeply personal things we discussed before our estrangement. I found myself utterly speechless. All those years of agonizing fertility treatments, the relentless cycle of doctor's appointments, the invasive hormone injections, the torrent of tears, the crushing self-blame. It had all been a monstrous, cruel charade. The courtroom pulsed with anticipation on the day of the hearing. Sarah occupied the front row, ostentatiously cradling baby James Jr., while her parents, predictably, flanked her with fervent protection. She was the picture of a wronged, grieving almost widow, a demure black dress, Minimal, strategically applied makeup, a meticulously practiced expression of profound sorrow. When she ascended to the witness stand, she delivered a masterclass in theatrical performance, tears glistening, carefully unshed, as she painted a saccharine portrait of her great love with James. "All I desire is what is just for my son," she declared, her voice carefully breaking with emotion. "He unquestionably deserves his father's legacy." My lawyer, Mr. Martinez, patiently allowed her performance to conclude before rising to speak. "Your Honor," he began, his voice calm, authoritative, "I wish to submit irrefutable evidence proving Miss Thompson's entire claim to be fraudulent." He advanced towards the bench, placing the hospital records before the judge. She meticulously reviewed the documents, her expression an impassive mask. Sarah's lawyer immediately sprang up, vehemently objecting on grounds of chain of custody and document authenticity. But Sarah's carefully constructed composure finally fractured. "Those documents are fake," she shrieked, clutching the baby closer, her voice shrill with desperation. "She forged them to steal my baby's inheritance." "Your Honor," Mr. Martinez continued, unperturbed, "given these medical records conclusively demonstrate Mr. Wilson's sterility, we formally request a DNA test to definitively establish paternity." Sarah's previous triumphant smirk returned, laced with a new edge of confidence. "That's impossible. James was an orphan, and his body was cremated. There's no one to test against." "Actually," Mr. Martinez interjected smoothly, gesturing towards the gallery, "I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Parker, James Wilson's biological mother." Elizabeth rose, her dignity undeniable, and a collective murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even from my vantage point, I witnessed the color drain from Sarah's face, leaving it an ashen mask. "I am willing to submit to a DNA test," Elizabeth announced clearly, her voice steady, "to definitively determine if this child is indeed my grandson." The judge, her gaze fixed, nodded slowly. "DNA testing is ordered. We will reconvene once the results are available." Sarah swayed precariously in her seat, all vitality sapped from her. Our mother, with a frantic urgency, rushed to support her, simultaneously leveling a venomous, accusatory glare at me. But for the very first time since this grotesque nightmare had commenced, a fragile tendril of hope unfurled within my ravaged heart. An absolute, profound silence descended upon the courtroom as the judge meticulously opened the envelope containing the DNA test results. Sarah remained a rigid tableau in her chair, baby James Jr. slumbering peacefully in her arms, utterly oblivious to the dramatic implosion unfolding around him. "The results conclusively demonstrate," the judge announced, her voice resonating with crystalline clarity and unwavering authority, "that there is no genetic relationship between the minor child and Mrs. Elizabeth Parker. Therefore, it can be definitively concluded that James Wilson was not the biological father of this child." A collective, audible gasp fractured the suffocating quiet. Sarah's carefully constructed facade disintegrated, her face crumpled, and she began to sob, rivers of mascara streaking her cheeks. "Miss Thompson," the judge's voice, now infused with palpable sternness, cut through Sarah's despair. "Would you care to explain why you perpetrated this egregious fraud upon the court?" Sarah clutched the baby tighter, her voice a desperate, barely audible whisper. I was seeing several men at the time James died and was cremated. I thought no one would ever know. He had money, and I needed. So you attempted to defraud your own sister," the judge interjected, with disapproval a tangible force in the room, "and use your parents as unwitting accomplices in this elaborate scheme." "I just wanted security for my baby," Sarah whimpered, but her performance had finally lost its potency. Even our parents, previously her staunch defenders, now looked utterly stunned, the full, horrifying extent of her deception finally dawning on them. The judge's ruling was delivered with chilling swiftness and absolute clarity. "This court finds unequivocally in favor of the defendant, Karen Wilson." All claims to James Wilson's estate by Sarah Thompson are dismissed with prejudice. Miss Thompson, consider yourself exceedingly fortunate that Mrs. Wilson has not chosen to press criminal charges for attempted fraud. Outside the courthouse, my parents, their faces etched with a desperate hope, hesitantly approached. Mom was openly weeping. Dad appeared older, more diminished than I had ever witnessed. "Karen, sweetheart," Mom implored, reaching for my hand. "We had no idea Sarah was lying. We can make this right. We've been struggling since you stopped the monthly transfers." I simply raised my hand, a silent, definitive barrier. "Don't. Just don't." With an unwavering resolve, I retrieved my phone, blocked their numbers right there in the harsh sunlight, and walked away without a single backward glance. Elizabeth was waiting patiently by my car. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her gaze imbued with genuine concern. I surprised myself by letting out a short, incredulous laugh. "You know what? I think I actually am. Or I will be." I inhaled deeply, a cleansing breath. "I've been thinking that apartment downtown James left me. I never truly loved it. Too many shadows. But perhaps you would like it." Her eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief. "Karen, no, I couldn't possibly. Please," I insisted, my voice firm. "You gave me back my life with those medical records. Allow me to offer you something in return." When I presented her with the keys a week later, she crumpled, tears silently tracking down her face. "I never thought I'd have a daughter," she whispered, embracing me fiercely. "That was 3 months ago. My biological family still attempts to pierce my new boundaries through mutual acquaintances and distant relatives. But I have systematically severed those ties, too." Sarah dispatched a letter, claiming a profound metamorphosis, expressing remorse, detailing her desperate need for assistance with the baby. I consigned it to the bin, unread. Instead, Elizabeth and I share weekly dinners. We are slowly, organically, charting the contours of our new relationship, exchanging anecdotes about James, the commendable and the reprehensible. She helps me to comprehend that while he wasn't the man I believed him to be, it doesn't nullify the authentic happiness we once shared. Just yesterday, I finally undertook the task of packing away James's remaining possessions. Elizabeth assisted, helping me to thoughtfully donate some items to charity and relegate others to the quiet solitude of the attic. As we worked, she wove tales of James as a mischievous little boy before the layers of deceit began to accumulate. It offered a strange, unexpected solace, knowing that version of him, the innocent one, had truly existed. I'm not yet ready for romance, but I am, unequivocally, ready to live again. I've returned to work full-time, found community in a hiking club, and am meticulously planning my inaugural solo vacation. Sometimes when I gaze into the mirror, I barely recognize the woman staring back. Life, it appears, possesses an astonishing capacity for surprise. I may have irrevocably lost the family I was born into, but I have serendipitously gained a new one I never anticipated. It isn't the life I meticulously charted, but perhaps it is, after all, the life I was inherently destined to embrace. This entire odyssey has stirred a profound introspection within me. Have you ever encountered such a monumental betrayal, or been compelled to utterly redefine the very essence of family? Share your thoughts below. I genuinely long to hear your stories.